We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Andrea Lucky. She's the Chief People Officer and Vice President of Human Resources for AAA Washington. Andrea, it's good to see you. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger. Do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Sure, great, thank you. Thanks for having me. So Andrea Lucky, she, her, hers. My background, so I have a degree in business from business administration from Pacific Lutheran University. And then I have a master's degree in human resources development. So I'm probably one of the few people who actually went to school and got some education in human resources and continued working in human resources. I have done a lot of work in getting into culture and engagement over time. I have worked in a variety of organizations. The first one that probably got me interested in culture and engagement was a Japanese-owned manufacturing company here in Washington State. And so it was really fascinating for me to welcome the expatriates every 3 to 5 years and work on that type of cultural work. But that gave me an interest in it. And so then I started getting really interested in how that impacted the workplace's culture. So that's what really got me into that kind of work and where my passion lies. When I was little, what I wanted to be when I grew up, I think that changed a lot. But one thing that I remember is that I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to be able to help people is kind of how I looked at it. And I was really never told that I couldn't do something. So the sky was a limit in whatever I wanted to do. And it changed over time, but that's probably where it started.
I love that answer. I always think it's interesting to reflect back and see where we think we would be, into the future and fast forward to today. I definitely have kind of a lot of questions around company culture and the way you're thinking about this as well. With all the changes happening consistently in the workplace, we know that a positive company culture is really sought out more than ever before, with half of employees saying that company culture is more important than salary or compensation as it relates to job satisfaction. What are your thoughts about that really intentional company culture? And do you think the easiest way to improve upon company culture is to remove any barriers or workplace issues?
Yeah, great question. This is a really big topic right now. And you're right, more and more employees are seeking a culture that really ties into their own beliefs, their own values, somewhere where they feel like they will belong. And we spend so much time at work, we don't want to be miserable at work. So we want to find that place where we have that good connection. And I think that, it's one thing to really love what you do or like what you do, but it's completely different to be doing it somewhere where you feel appreciated, where you feel you're making a difference, or you're bringing value, and ultimately that you're respected by the place that you work. And I would say that, it's not possible to remove all the workplace issues. I think wherever you have people, you're going to have issues, just differences of opinion. But, I think it's important. One, we could look at removing the things that are detrimental or that detract from our culture. And it's really important to set your vision, mission, and values so that people and communicate that and live by them, do what you say you're going to do. But you want to recruit to those. You want to recognize people for how they contribute to that. You want to reward people to that. And I like to say, I heard this somewhere, and you hear a lot of people say, let's hire somebody for a culture fit. But I look at it a little bit differently now, and I look at it as a culture add. Who is going to add to our culture? And that's who you want to look for. That's what you want to reward and recognize. So when you're recruiting, look at those people who have the same values as your vision, mission, and values, who will drive that sense of belonging and connectedness. And where people are aligned with the organization and with each other, because that's where you're going to get the most success. When you're looking for the people who add to that mission or your vision for the company, that's where you're going to get the best success.
Absolutely. Having the kind of North Star of the values is really important. And not only like knowing what the values are, but what behavior is really rewarded, what's not tolerated as well, and
Exactly.
these detrimental things to the workplace, and really keeping an ear to the ground of what employees are talking about and kind of continuing the conversation. Another study found that more than 60% of employees say it's really important for their company or employer to really share in the caring for their families and communities too. And definitely want to ask how you're showing up for employees' families and the community at AAA Washington as well.
Yeah. So, there's really a variety of ways, and there's no one answer, a one and done kind of thing. It's a it's a continuum, and a variety of ways that you would do this. But obviously there's some of the easy answers, like you're partnering with your local organizations, you're offering to help, with whatever it might be, donating backpacks for schools or food, or those kinds of things. But one of the things that we're doing that is new for us this year is the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. And I don't know if people are familiar with that, but Ruby Bridges, just as a reminder, that she was the first African-American child to integrate in a school in New Orleans back in 1960. And she was actually escorted by federal marshals to school because her safety was at risk. And it wasn't until a group of fifth graders in California back just a few years ago, back in, I think it was 2018, when they started learning about the civil rights movement, a child asked, why isn't there a Ruby Bridges Day? Or why don't we recognize her for what she did? And so that school started the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. And it's on November 14th. So this coming Monday, AAA Washington, we're partnering with some local schools, and we're going to be supporting their walk with all the kids, being there to give support and high five and, juice boxes or whatever it is, but to support them in their walk. But additionally, not everyone's going to be able to do that. So we're also encouraging our employees to have their own walk, whether it's with their families or their coworkers or just by themselves, or whatever it might be, but go out there. And the most important thing that she's talking about is to have the conversations with people about belonging and how to fit in. And so we're asking our employees to do this and then to share that conversation with each other, to share it with us, and to put something on a sign and take a picture of the things that they talked about with their families or their coworkers, or thought about if they're going on their own. So that's a new thing that we're doing that I'm really excited to see what the turnout is going to be. We're having people wear purple because that's the color for the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. So we're having people wear purple that day. And so that's really exciting, something different. And then, I'd say for employees, there's so much going on with employees right now with balancing work and their personal lives. So for showing up for them, we really, as leaders, we really need to find out what our employees' needs are. And so at my former organization, actually, we had introduced care.com because we found that people were really struggling with how to balance childcare when their kids were going to school online and they're trying to work. Or dealing with parent care issues or even pet care issues because it was a distraction, maybe they thought. But we introduced care.com, which really helped them deal with those kinds of care things, so they would know that they could find a place to provide care for their loved ones, or even emergency care. If their caregiver was sick, what are they going to do to be able to work? So that was one thing we did because that was a need that our employees were telling us. And we're really seeing people are struggling with mental well-being. And that's one of the biggest topics I would say that's coming up here is, the way we're working is changing and we're all just trying to figure it out. And mental health and well-being is a really important area of focus right now. So how can we help our employees with that? How do we teach our managers how to recognize when somebody's struggling? And then let's say they figure that out. How do we figure out how to help them? Because that's a scary thing too. So we're working on developing some training around that to educate our managers on how to recognize that and how to help employees, but also being vulnerable ourselves and saying, hey, yeah, I'm overwhelmed here. I need some help here. And asking for help and letting people know that it's okay to ask for help, whatever it is, even if it's help with work. But to help each other. And, this is a culture item, obviously. It's a big culture item, and how we are at work and how we help each other. So you want to make it okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help, and then, just to be there for our employees, to support them in whatever it is that they need, and let them know that we care. So that's what we're doing.
You really want to model that behavior and also preventatively kind of get ahead of proactively burnout and mental well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being is all related to how someone shows up at work too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a change that we're seeing in terms of having the conversation, especially at work, and having these resources available too. How have you really thought about kind of redefining as well things like employee engagement in a remote world, and thinking about the balance and blend of work and life too?
Yeah, this is obviously a big topic for everyone. It's definitely a work in progress. I think we're going to have to try a lot of things and see how they go, and then pivot, and just be open and honest with our employees to, like, hey, we're gonna try this and see. We heard you. So asking for that input. So what we did at AAA Washington was we surveyed our workforce to find out what was important to them in the hybrid world. So we asked them questions around, like, when you're at work, what are the things that you go there for or to do, or even what do you miss about the pre-pandemic working world, and what you're looking for. And so what we found with our employees is that, one, I think that our leaders I think they're a bit unsure how to lead in that hybrid environment. You don't have those moments of connection. You don't have the just running into the hallway and asking people a quick question. Everything's much more deliberate. And so we want to make sure that our managers feel like they have the tools and the resources and the confidence to be able to lead in this new way, to make sure that we're calling people, making sure everyone's voice is heard, making sure that we're recognizing them for a good job. Recognition is just as important, if not more so, than it used to be in this hybrid world. So we need to be able to recognize our employees for their good work. So we're developing, again, and I'm kind of newer at AAA Washington. So a lot of what I'm doing is building it out where I've had success before. And some of it is just trying new things, but building out that education and knowledge base for our managers so that they really feel confident in doing these things to recognize their employees. Because without that feeling of engagement, or if they don't feel like if they're being heard, or if they have access to the manager, they can't just pop into an office, for example, how the managers then are ensuring that this is happening. And sometimes, you've got some people who are in person at AAA Washington. We have folks who are in some of the retail stores for travel, and then we've got others who are remote. And so how do you blend them together in a meeting where it's not just the people in person who are getting all the attention? So making sure that the managers are aware that they're thanking people, they're bringing them together, and making people feel that they are present and participating, and that they're appreciated. So it is a work in progress, definitely. And like I said, some things are working well, and some things I think we need to pivot and figure out a better way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think employee recognition, knowing that your work is impactful and meaningful and valued by the business, by the leaders, is a really important piece to the puzzle as well, in terms of company culture and really making sure folks are engaged.
Absolutely. And I would also say that, to not be afraid to have conversations to get employees' input. How do you like to be recognized, or what do you have any input on how we can improve? This is something I'm working on as a leader. How can you help me improve? So not to be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, not being afraid and really actively listening to the answer.
Actively listening. Yes, exactly.
You brought up kind of those moments where you can pass someone in the hallway or go over to someone's desk. In a hybrid world, it's a little bit different to think about these interactions. How are you thinking about really cultivating and further helping to facilitate those moments where you are building relationships with your team?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because it's something that we talk a lot about at the leadership team at AAA Washington. Because it seems like, there are even studies that show that that level of connection is so important. And, and some people don't like connection, or, they like to just kind of work in their own bubble. So you also want to balance it with people who like to be very independent, but still there are moments of connection with people regardless. So you want to find ways to bring that connectedness, that's a tough word to say, connectedness and belonging in a remote world. I would say, we certainly don't have it all figured out, but we're looking at things like, exploring kind of like ERG types of things where there could be some virtual gatherings with folks on topics of interest. So it's like replacing that water cooler conversation that you used to have. So maybe there's something like a parents of young children, and that there's a meeting that they could feel like they could talk about how do you balance work with the young one, or how do you balance work with kids in school. So we're talking about developing those kinds of things. I've done also scheduling virtual happy hours, and this is maybe not anything new, but it was really successful. We actually, with my team, we sent a bottle of wine or a drink of choice to our team with a wine glass, with an HR wine glass. And we got together and we just played some games online, and had a great time. So things like that, just it's creating those moments for people to get together and connect, and feel that they belong. That's so important. And I think I said it earlier, but we have to be so, we have to make an effort to do it. It just doesn't happen. You have to make an effort now and schedule it in. Again, surveying employees, the survey that we did on, like I was talking about the engagement, we found out that the employees missed just bumping into people in the hallway, having those conversations, or in the servery where you're getting a cup of coffee or something. That's gone if you're remote, or you don't see the same people if you're hybrid and you're coming in sometimes. They also said that they miss brainstorming sessions. So some of our folks are really adept at Teams. We use Teams primarily, and they can do those brainstorming sessions like the whiteboard work on Teams, but other leaders don't know how to use it very well. So helping each other figure out how to use our technology to create those same things in a virtual world. So we can still do the same thing. We just have to figure out a new way to do it. So those are a couple of things that we've done. And I was reading just recently, there's an HBR, Harvard Business Review article that was discussing the subject, and it showed that the research study that they did showed that motivation at work was largely impacted by feelings of connection to others, and that we're inspired when we're reminded that we're not alone in our experiences. So that's why we're thinking those ERG types of works, if we have people of similar experiences that maybe are struggling with things or sharing, or just getting together and talking, to create those moments, it's going to really help. And so what we've done so far with like the virtual happy hour that I've talked about, and just having some of the brainstorming sessions, those have been really successful, and people have felt, and even we've done huddles, like all employee huddles every Monday from 2:30 to 3. We have an all employee huddle. So everyone logs in and the CEO's on the line. And we talk a little bit about business kinds of things, but we also answer questions from employees. So there's still that dialogue and a responsiveness and getting their questions answered, and that the CEO cares, and is there showing up. So that's another thing that we've done that's been really successful to bring in that connection.
Yeah, you never want to assume what people want and need. And when you ask, how do you meet folks where they are as well, and really provide the best environment for folks to feel empowered to do their best work. We talked about that meaningful connection, what engagement looks like, really thinking about building an intentional company culture. Just because you have really great intentions, which is part of it, doesn't mean it's always happening. If you don't invest time, money, and resources in it as well, continue to iterate on it too. I think, we talked about how company culture is really important to employees, but also kind of the value of the work is rooted in compensation and total compensation as well. And there are a lot of kind of law changes around this too. What is your philosophy around compensation and how you're iterating for a really equitable comp process across the board?
Yeah, there's a lot on this right now. It's definitely a hot topic. I guess my philosophy is, really simply put, is to remove compensation as an issue from the table. So if you're paying your people fairly, and you're competitive, and I mean, there's varying degrees of what that looks like. I mean, you could be, a little behind, or some companies can afford to be more ahead, but if you're paying fairly and you can explain, and people understand the way that you pay, that issue is no longer on the table, and you can focus on other things that can have a really meaningful impact on the culture. So that's again, very, very simple way of saying what my philosophy is. But you're right, you mentioned the pay transparency laws. That's really making this an imperative right now, but it's also the right thing to do. So, you need to have a program and a strategy that really supports and maintains whatever program you've put into place. You want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing it, because pay and competitive pay changes. It's not stagnant. So you need to make sure that you're reviewing it to make sure that whatever your philosophy is and how you're going to pay, that you're maintaining that position, that all your decisions are aligning with your strategy, and that leaders are all on the same page. So it's really important that you're training your leaders so that they can have, again, feeling confident with having those conversations with their employees. That's a really tough conversation to have sometimes. And pay is an emotional topic, very personal topic. So it can get heated. So if the managers are feeling more comfortable with having those conversations, that goes a long way. Communicating it, I think that's one of the biggest areas that companies have a hard time with, is if they're not communicating how their pay program works. It seems like, or it can be perceived that numbers are just picked out of the air. I'm going to pay you 50,000. I'm going to pay you 80,000. And what is it based on? So communicate to employees. You don't have to tell everything. There's some things that you don't want to share, but you want to put it in a context that they understand. And so that they aren't questioning or feeling that, not having that perception that their pay is fair, that their pay is not fair, and that that they can explain and they understand how, if it's based on performance, for example, how they performed, if it's based on years of experience. You just want to be able to explain that so they have an understanding of how that works. And that then it removes it as an issue. As long as everybody's transparent about it and feel comfortable with it, you can focus on other things. This would be a constant, you get into compression issues and things. So it could be a constant. You could be like on a treadmill or hamster wheel running with this if you're constantly having to say, oh, this person's paid too low, I'm going to fix it. Now that made this person too low over here, so I'm going to fix that. Now it's over here. You don't want to be doing that.
Yeah, if you are proactive about it and you have a strong foundation, you're thinking about things equitably as well, it is just really helpful in the long term. That communication piece, the why behind compensation structures, is really important too. I would love to know, how else are you really investing in, once you have kind of that environment where people feel like they do their best work, they're growing, they're learning? What about career pathing and employee development?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a really important one. And I find that a lot of companies don't really put a lot of their resources to this. What I've found in my experience, there are a lot of people, that I guess nowadays employees tend to move from job to job, but sometimes they come back too. And you want to make them feel welcome coming back. But a lot of employees, they're looking for a place that will help them develop and grow. And what we're doing now is that we're recruiting for a senior learning and development manager to be able to put the focus on this and develop a strategy around this. We've put resources in the budget. I've been talking with the senior leadership team about how important this is as well. So having those conversations to get the support from the top. Again, communication. There's always, it's like real estate with location and location. I think for business, there's communication. So you can have all the best plans, you can have career paths, you can have development programs. If you don't communicate it, people aren't aware of it, it's not going to work. So communicating it to employees with their managers, having those regular conversations, not just at the performance review time, to make them aware of what career paths there are, what their interests are. If they're wanting to go in a certain direction, here's the path. You could lay it out for them. And it's also important to remember that it goes both ways. So employees also have a stake in their own development. So it's not up to the manager completely to do everything, but the employee has to work on it as well. But having that leadership support and the resources applied to it, and then that culture and communication of it, that shows employees that you take it seriously and that you value them as an employee and what they can bring to the organization, not just today, but in the future.
Yeah, communicate, knowing that, career ambitions can always change, and also just the skills learned, and that you're not in it kind of alone as well, whether you're the employee, manager, or company too. And again, being proactive about having these conversations, I think, is a common theme that's coming up too. I want to ask, from an industry perspective, we've seen so many changes from kind of the role of work, the workplace. What are some of the patterns you've seen specifically in the human resources and people field over the past 2 years that you want to highlight, or you're most excited by?
Wow. So yeah, HR is always changing. I think it's never too late to get into HR because it's going to be moving all the time. So you'll be at the beginning of something. But what we're really seeing is that a lot of what's coming is much more employee focused than it used to be. I think more of that stuff is moving to the forefront. So, you're seeing different time off laws in cities or states, minimum wage laws. I mean, in Washington, we have the highest, right? The highest minimum wage law, but then you have Seattle that's even higher than that. As we talked about earlier, the pay transparency laws are coming in a lot of different states. But we're also noticing benefits program enhancements that are addressing very polarizing topics, such as abortion or gender reassignment. So we're seeing that more employee-centric laws and benefits and comp and benefits types of laws in particular, but labor laws as well, that are really focusing on the employees. And I think we're going to continue to see more of this as we recognize that there are definite needs in the organizations today, and that people are no longer willing to tolerate the way something was or has been for a long time, that it's time for change. And we're going to continue to see those kinds of changes. And it's really exciting. There's a lot going on, but it's really exciting.
Absolutely. There is a lot going on, and it's exciting to see kind of the non-negotiables that companies and leaders and also government is kind of looking into as well, to make sure people's voices are heard and people have the opportunity to access the resources that they need. Andrea, I know I asked a lot of questions about kind of what you're doing at AAA Washington, about the industry and your why as well. Is there anything that I didn't specifically ask that you want to share with folks or underscore any key takeaways?
Yeah, I guess I'd want to leave people with, leaders, we need to figure out how to engage our workforces in this new hybrid world. People have a taste of the digital world now, both employees and consumers on both sides. So businesses, to be successful, are going to need to figure out how to provide their services in a digital way and engage employees in a digital way. That's what people are expecting nowadays. And I would say too that it's really important to note we can't go back to the way it was pre-pandemic. The immediate post-pandemic world is not the answer either, but we need to find kind of a third way and what that looks like. And that's what we're working on at AAA Washington, is figuring out who we are and who we are as an organization for our employees and our members. And one of the biggest things, I guess I would say, is to not be afraid to solicit information from your employees, and to remember to look for and promote that culture ad rather than a fit.
I think those are really good key takeaways to really remember as we top up our conversation. Andrea, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.